much of an opportunity at this point to welcome both deputies from the different sides of the House. However, there'll be other opportunities at a later date. But I know I speak in everybody's behalf when we recognise that this is a very special day for both deputies to be elected to this House. And I wish them both every success and happiness while they're here. And I hope they make a major contribution to the workings of the House and its committees. As we now are approaching 2:30, I think it would be in order to call on the Minister for Finance to make his budget statement.
I can, Corla. When the government took office in March of 2011, we set out a plan to regain control of Ireland's fiscal and economic policies, to grow the economy and to get people back to work. Many people, both inside and outside the House, believed that we as a government would fail, and they opposed each and every step we took along the way. But I can, Corla, the government did not fail. We exited the bailout. The public finances are under control. The Irish economy is growing at the fastest rate among developed economies. The rate of jobs creation in Ireland is one of the fastest in Europe. We are ahead of our planned fiscal targets, and we have managed to achieve this progress with less tax increases and fewer expenditure cuts than envisaged in 2011. We have succeeded in key negotiations over our EU and IMF loans and on the promissory notes. The road we have travelled to get to this point has been very difficult, and the Irish people have made major sacrifices. But the policies pursued by this government have worked, and the recovery in the Irish economy is well underway. The recovery has not spread across the country yet, and many families have yet to experience it. The government is fully aware of this fact. For many people, the recovery will only come when they get a job. For some, the recovery will come when they see more money in their pockets. For many families, the permanent return of a loved one who has emigrated will mark the end of the crisis and start the recovery. Budget 215 is about securing the recovery, building for the future and broadening it to families across the country. This government will not be returning to the boom and bust model of the past that has spectacularly and repeatedly failed the Irish people. We must secure a new economy for a new Ireland. Of course, we must continue to deal with the legacy issues of the economic crisis, and we will do so. But today is about looking forward, is about building for the future upon this solid foundation that has been so painstakingly laid. As a result of the policies pursued by this government and the sacrifices of the Irish people, the macroeconomic and fiscal framework underpinning this year's budget is far more favourable than in previous years. The recovery is gaining momentum. While exports are continuing to grow, the recovery is broadening, with domestic sources of growth, consumer spending and investment contributing positively for the first time since 2007. We have now had 7 consecutive quarters of solid annual employment expansion, and we have now seen an increase in employment of over 70,000 people at work since the low point in early 2012. Unemployment, while still too high at 11.1%, is at its lowest level in 5.5 years and has now fallen for 27 months in a row. My department is forecasting a continuation of this trend and expects unemployment to fall to an average of just above 10% next year. It is clear that the measures introduced to support job creation in key sectors of the economy are working. My department estimates there will be around 1,920,000 people at work by the end of this year. This is over 80,000 higher than at the low point 2.5 years ago. By the end of 2015, it is anticipated that the increase from the low point will be around 128,000, and we expect to have 2 million people at work in 2016. The evidence of the growing economy can be seen in the public finances. Throughout the course of 2014, taxes have grown steadily, and my department is projecting an outturn of over 41 billion, 1 billion ahead of profile. Thanks to this strong revenue growth, effective expenditure management and the impact of European statistical changes, the forecast deficit for 2014 is 3.7% of GDP. This is well inside our excessive deficit procedure target of 5.1% and the 4.8% target on which we built the budget in 2014. My department is forecasting GDP growth of 4.7% this year. On a no-policy change basis, the department is forecasting real GDP growth in 2015 of 3.6%. These forecasts are prudent and were endorsed by the Irish Fiscal Advisory Council. However, as a result of the package of measures I am introducing today, the GDP growth forecast in 2015 has been revised up to 3.9%. In 2016, the growth rate will be 3.4%. In 2017, the growth rate will be 3.4%. And in 2018, the growth rate will be again 3.4%. This is the type of solid and steady economic growth that we want in coming years. The government's strategy to reduce the burden of our debt by improving the terms of our EU IMF loans and the promissory note, minimising future borrowing requirements by reducing the deficit and by growing the economy is working. The forecast debt to GDP ratio for in 2014 is under 111%. When account is taken of cash balances and other financial assets, the 2014 net debt forecast is just below 91%. Furthermore, a debt-reducing primary surplus of 0.3% of GDP will be achieved this year. However, our debt is still high by comparison to many of our fellow EU members, so we need to continue this approach. Not only will this make the debt more sustainable, it will also minimise the cost to the taxpayer of interest paid on the national debt. This is the backdrop to today's budget. Prudent and responsible budgeting has got us to this point. Prudent and responsible budgeting will be how we will continue. Each year, this government has set ambitious deficit reduction targets, often inside those required under the Stability and Growth Pact, and each year we have beaten these targets. This approach has been a key factor in restoring market access and in successfully exiting the EU IMF programme last year. Investor confidence in Ireland has returned, and our 10-year sovereign bond yields are down to record lows, trading at 1.72 this morning. The three major agencies, Moody's, S&P and Fitch, all upgraded their rating of our long-term debt during 2014, with two of them moving us into the A grades. That is why I am targeting a deficit of 2.7% in Budget 2015, ahead of the required target of 2.9% of GDP. I think that it is appropriate to go beyond our requirements under the Stability and Growth Pact in order to build upon the progress made to date. Achieving a deficit below 3% does not signal an end to fiscal prudence in Ireland. Exceeding our target in 2015 will underpin solid, steady economic growth into the medium term and is a further step on the way to balancing the budget. Even so, these figures do not fully reflect the progress that we are making, as an element of the surplus income due from the central bank in 2015 is being used to reduce the debt. If the entire surplus income was counted for deficit reduction, the forecast deficit will be 2.5% next year. This prudent approach further improves our debt sustainability. We are making significant progress, and we are forecasting that our gross debt ratio will drop below 100% of GDP in 2018, ahead of the reduction required by the Stability and Growth Pact. Total general government revenue will be 65.2 billion in 2015, and total general expenditure will be 70.5 billion. Expenditure under the government expenditure ceiling, consisting of gross voted expenditure, along with expenditure funded by the Social Insurance Fund and the National Training Fund, will be 53.6 billion. Minister Howland will set out full details of his 2015 expenditure allocations and publish the ministerial expenditure ceilings. Since coming to office, the Government has provided vital supports to indigenous industry to grow and create jobs, such as the Jobs Initiative for the tourism sector, the tax reform plan for SMEs, and measures such as the home renovation incentive for the construction sector. We have introduced significant reforms and improvements to our corporate tax system, and last year I introduced changes to address stateless companies. Today I am publishing a roadmap to secure Ireland's place as the destination for the best and most successful companies in the world. There are many changes taking place globally in corporate tax. The key role the corporate tax regime plays in attracting investment is recognised by all developed economies, and our competitors for foreign direct investment are introducing enhancements to their systems to attract investment. For over 60 years, foreign direct investment has been a cornerstone of Ireland's economic development. We have competed for and won major investments into Ireland and Europe for some of the largest and most successful companies in the world. With over 166,000 people employed in over 1,100 companies, the Irish foreign direct investment sector has real substance. Our competitive corporate tax regime plays a key role. Ireland's corporate tax strategy has three key elements: the rate, the regime and our reputation, and I will deal with each issue in turn. The 12.5% tax rate remains at the heart of this. The Government has successfully protected the 12.5% tax rate in recent years. The 12.5% tax rate never has been and never will be up for discussion. The 12.5% tax rate is settled policy. It will not change. The roadmap responds to a changing international environment and ensures that we continue to attract and retain companies of real substance, offering real jobs. The roadmap will improve Ireland's R&D regime by fully phasing out the R&D base year from the 1st of January 2015, enhance Ireland's existing intangible asset tax provisions to make Ireland an even more attractive location for companies to develop intellectual property, improve SARP, the Special Assignee Relief Programme, and increase the resources of the Revenue Commissioners in its role as a competent authority. I am also going to extend the 3-year corporation tax relief for start-up companies and the accelerated capital allowance scheme for energy-efficient equipment for a further 3 years. Companies now invest as much or more in knowledge-based capital as they do in physical capital, such as plant and machinery. Subsequently, I intend putting in place a knowledge development box, along the lines of patent and innovation boxes which have existed for many years in countries that compete with us for foreign direct investment. I am launching a public consultation process to gather views on how the knowledge development box should operate, and I plan to legislate for it in next year's finance bill, or as soon as the EU and the OECD discussions conclude. My intention is that the knowledge development box will be best in class and at a low, competitive and sustainable tax rate. This intellectual property offering will be a key element in attracting future foreign direct investment to Ireland. Aggressive tax planning by the multinational companies has been criticised by governments across the globe and has damaged the reputation of many countries. Schemes that exploit mismatches in tax legislation are being heavily scrutinised by the OECD and others, and through the base erosion and profit shifting project that will come to an end over time. The so-called double Irish is one of many such schemes. I am abolishing the ability of companies to use the double Irish by changing our residency rules to require all companies registered in Ireland to also be tax resident in Ireland. This legal change will take effect from the 1st of January 2015 for new companies. For existing companies, there will be provision for a transition period until the end of 2020. This proactive change will bring an end to international tax planning. This proactive change will not bring an end to international tax planning. This requires coordinated action by all countries, By taking action now and making this change as part of a broader reform of our corporate tax system, we are giving certainty to investors about corporate tax in Ireland for the next decade. These measures will enhance Ireland's corporate tax regime and align it with best practice internationally. We will ensure that Ireland continues to be the home of the best and most successful companies in the world. We will attract and retain companies with real substance, offering real jobs. Full details of all the measures I am announcing today will be included in the Finance Bill. These corporation tax reforms will also support our international financial services sector. Over 33,000 highly skilled professionals are employed in international financial services in Ireland, and a new strategy for financial services in Ireland is currently being developed and will be launched next year. The strategy will identify and lay out actions to successfully develop the opportunities to grow the sector in this globally competitive market and increase the numbers employed. I now move to farming and the agri-food sector. Farming is our biggest indigenous industry, with an annual turnover of about 26 billion and 170,000 employees. It is not only important because of the number of people it employs, but also because of where it employs those people, in every townland and along every byroad in Ireland. I am publishing today the Agri Taxation Review, which I announced in last year's budget. Arising from the recommendations in the review, I am introducing a number of tax measures to support farming. There will be no milk quotas from 2015, leading to new opportunities that we can exploit, but we need to make additional land available to young and active farmers. Therefore, to encourage the long-term leasing of land and improve productivity, I am increasing the income tax exempt threshold by 50% and introducing a new threshold for leases of 15 years and over. I am allowing relief where the leasee is a company. I am removing the current 40 years of age threshold for leasing relief. I am targeting CAT relief for agricultural property to ensure it is used by active farmers. I am broadening CGT retirement relief so that, for example, individuals can now lease out their land for up to 25 years prior to disposal and be eligible for CGT retirement relief. I am extending CGT retirement relief to land let under Conacher, which is disposed of or converted to long-term leasing before the end of 2016. I am extending stamp duty relief for non-residential land transfers between close relatives. I am removing stamp duty on agricultural leases in excess of 5 years, and I am extending CGT farm restructuring relief to the end of 2016 and broadening it to allow for restructuring through whole farm replacements. Volatile agricultural prices make it difficult for farming families to earn a steady income over a number of years. To improve the situation, I am increasing the range of income averaging from 3 to 5 years. I am also allowing income averaging on farm income to be available to farmers who derive income from another trade or profession if this is due to on-farm diversification. This measure will be reviewed after 3 years to assess how well it is working. The farmer's flat rate additional for farmers, the farmer's flat rate addition for farmers not registered for VAT is being increased from 5% to 5.2%, with effect from the 1st of January 2015. In recognition of the importance of the Irish bloodstock industry to the rural economy and the anticipated yield of 25 million per annum for betting duty, the Government will be providing an additional 6 million a year for 3 years to the Fund for Horse and Greyhound Racing. The Government is also allocating additional capital of 5 million to Horse Racing Ireland in 2015 to leverage investment in racecourses. Microbreweries in Ireland have been a success story in recent years. They have expanded their market share, provided employment throughout the country, and are now making inroads into markets abroad. To further assist the development of this sector and not to stand in the way of growth, I am increasing the annual excess relief production ceilings for microbreweries from 20,000 to 30,000 hectolitres. Having experienced the positive outcome of the agri-taxation review, I am now proposing a similar exercise for the marine sector. The Government has prioritised the marine as a key area for further growth under the Harnessing Our Oceans Wealth strategy, with a target of doubling the value of Ireland's blue economy by 2030. I am keen to ensure there is a supportive financial environment underpinning this target, and so I intend to review the financial and taxation supports and opportunities available to the marine sector. The exercise will not cover offshore petroleum exploration and production, as a revised taxation regime for this area has already been determined. My department will work closely with the Marine Coordination Group to examine strategic measures that could be introduced to help Ireland as an island nation to fulfil its potential in the marine area. The new Irish Film Tax Credit Scheme is due to commence in 2015, and I am pleased that it has been broadly welcomed by the film industry. The film industry is very important to modern Irish culture and to the economy, not just in terms of jobs, but also indirectly through tourism promotion. As the new scheme beds down next year, I will be monitoring how it works and how it can be improved. One of the issues that I will consider in the context of Budget 2016 is a possible increase to the 50 million cap on eligible expenditure, subject, of course, to resource constraints. Tourism delivers income and jobs in every town and city, in every corner of the country. The abolition of the air travel tax last year will result in over 1 million extra passengers through additional capacity on many existing routes, as well as the introduction of new services. The reduced 9% rate of VAT on tourism-related activities has been a great success, and there are now an extra 23,000 employed in the sector since mid-2011. The initiative is delivering, and I am retaining the 9% VAT rate for these services. In the light of reports of rising prices in this sector, it is incumbent on the industry to ensure that this relief continues to be passed through fully to the consumer. However, let me be clear, the taxpayer cannot be the only stakeholder keeping costs down in the sector. If prices begin to rise, the case for retaining the measure diminishes. The reduction in the VAT rate for tourism services to 9% was funded by the 0.6 pension levy I introduced in the Jobs Initiative in 2011 and continued in the budget last year. Without the pension levy, there would have been no VAT reduction. This is a fact. Not only would this have meant that thousands of jobs that have been created in the sector may not have been created, but thousands of existing jobs could have been put at risk. As a result of the overall improvement in the country's finances, I am now in a position to continue the VAT reduction, but I am also ending the 0.6 pension levy at the end of 2014. The additional 0.15% pension levy I introduced for 2014 and 2015 will expire at the end of 2015. Every economy needs a fully functioning property market. Despite progress in recent years, the market is not currently meeting the needs of our citizens. This is evident in private housing and social housing and in the rental market, particularly in Dublin. There is strong demand for housing but insufficient supply. The state alone cannot meet the private and social housing needs of all our citizens, nor can the state use taxpayers' money to subsidise private building and construction companies or guarantee their debts and liabilities. Under the Construction 2020 strategy, excuse me, I can't call it. Under the Construction 2020 strategy, the Government is removing blockages from the system to get the market moving, to generate building activity and to increase supply. Across government, we are taking action to support the private and social housing and rental sectors by addressing issues related to the planning regulations and development systems, the supply of land and upgrading of existing housing stock, and financing of private and social housing development. The Minister for Public Expenditure and Reform will address the issue of social housing in his statement. My colleague, the Minister for Environment, Community and Local Government, has announced changes to the Planning Act and will be making further improvements to the system in due course. To increase and improve the housing stock, I am bringing forward a number of measures. The home renovation incentive has been very successful to date, with just under 9,300 homes on the HRI online system, representing nearly 190 million worth of work, involving some 3,000 contractors. The incentive is generating employment in the tax-compliant construction sector and increasing sales in building supplies, hardware and related businesses. To support legitimate operators in the rental and construction sector and help upgrade the quality of private rental stock, particularly at the lower end, I am extending the home renovation incentive to rental properties whose owners are liable to income tax. This means that this very successful scheme will now be available to landlords for work carried out from budget night until the end of 2015. This will allow work to be carried out in a cost-effective manner, and I would expect that the savings realised under this scheme will be reflected in rent levels. The Living City initiative, announced in Budget 2013 and extended last year to all 6 of our cities, targets certain areas that are most in need of regeneration. In these cities, discussion with the European Commission are at an advanced stage, and I am hopeful that the local authorities in each city, Dublin, Cork, Limerick, Waterford, Galway and Kilkenny, will be in a position to suggest final proposals for eligible areas in their cities later this year, in time for the full rollout of the initiative in early 2015. This is a very attractive initiative designed to bring families back into our city centres and to maximise the use of existing pre-1914 buildings by transforming them into modern homes. This initiative allows homeowners to offset the entire cost of renovation against their income tax over the 10-year period. I am also removing the capital gains tax relief I introduced to incentivise the purchase of property between the 7th of December 2011 and the end of 2014. It has achieved its objective of increasing property transactions and is no longer needed. I am removing, with effect from the 1st of January 2015, the 80% windfall tax applying to chargeable gains on the disposal or development of land which are attributable to planning decisions made since October 2009. The 33% rate of capital gains tax and other standard taxation arrangements will now apply to the property market as it does to other normal functioning capital asset markets. To support first-time buyers saving for their first home, I am introducing a refund for deposit interest retention tax, or DIRT, on saving used to purchase their home. This refund will apply from budget night and will run until the end of 2017 in respect of savings up to a maximum of 20% of the purchase price. As a result, first-time buyers will be able to save for their first home and retain 100% of the interest that they earn on their savings. I would expect that the banks will introduce specific savings products to support this new initiative. The Ireland Strategic Investment Fund, or ISIF, under the auspices of the NTMA, is exploring ways through its commercial mandate to support financing projects that will enhance the supply of housing. Potential options include the development of house builders' investment funds, enabling of large-scale development projects, and investment in social housing PPP projects. There will be no return to the past, where tax incentives for developers drove supply. The Government is doing its part to overcome the challenges and remove the roadblocks to a fully functioning property market. It is up to the other stakeholders to follow suit. There is a view that owners of zoned and serviced land are waiting for higher prices, and that is why they are not taking steps to develop their land or sell it to others who will. I will launch a public consultation in the coming months on this issue, and if it turns out to be a valid point of view, I will examine what taxation measures might be taken to penalise landowners who do not develop land that is already zoned and serviced. To alleviate the burden of the new water charge on working families across the country, income tax relief will be available at the standard rate in respect of water charges up to a maximum of €500 per year per household. The water charges relief will be worth up to €100 per household per annum when claimed in the following year. I have said.
Without interruption, please. Thank you. Deputies, without interruption, please.
I have said on many occasions that SMEs are the lifeblood of our economy and play a crucial role in economic and employment growth. The Government has introduced a range of initiatives to support the SME sector to grow and create jobs. The Strategic Banking Corporation of Ireland, which is expected to be formally launched at the end of this month, will increase the availability of longer duration loans coupled with more flexible conditions and potentially at a lower cost. The permanent TSB, which will shortly recommence actively lending to the SME sector, has agreed to participate in the Credit Review Office process, and Ulster Bank is actively considering making a similar commitment. The Seed Capital Scheme will be relaunched in the coming months. I am increasing the amount of finance that can be raised by a company under the Employment and Investment Incentive to €5 million annually, subject to a lifetime maximum of €15 million. Investment in the management and operation of nursing homes, medium-sized enterprises in non-assisted areas, and internationally traded financial services that are certified by Enterprise Ireland will now qualify under this scheme. I am increasing the required holding period for shares from 3 years to 4 years and extending the inclusion of hotels, guest houses and self-catering accommodation in the scheme by a further 3 years. These changes are subject to the approval of the European Commission. To support SMEs to grow their business abroad, I am improving the foreign earnings deduction by extending the list of countries eligible to include Mexico, Chile and certain countries in the Middle East and Asia. I am reducing the number of days that employees are required to be abroad in a year to 40 days, and I am including travel time in order to make it easier for smaller companies to send employees on trade missions. My department and the Department of Jobs, Enterprise and Innovation will roll out an integrated export finance strategy in 2015, with financing products and platforms being developed by the SPCI and the Ireland Strategic Investment Fund in conjunction with Enterprise Ireland. A fair, efficient and competitive income tax system is essential for economic growth and for job creation. Income tax increases introduced between 2008 and 2011 mean that employees on the minimum wage are liable to the top rate of USC, and workers on average incomes in Ireland face a marginal tax rate of 52% of their income when income tax, USC and PRSI are combined. While those who have lost their jobs have been hit the hardest in recent years, working families have seen significant falls in both their wages and take-home pay. These outcomes impact on competitiveness, are negative for economic growth and act as a barrier to job creation. Reduced take-home pay also directly affects consumer confidence, with serious consequences for businesses, especially for retailers. We've all seen the impact of this in towns and villages the length and breadth of the country. In each of my previous 3 budgets, we have not increased income tax or universal charge rates, nor have we reduced credits or bans. In my first budget, I exempted 330,000 low-income earners from USC. The Government viewed this as the best possible approach to income tax policy for the early phase of our national recovery. As we enter a new phase in the recovery, the progress made over the past 3 years in improving public finances, increasing economic growth and creating jobs means the Government can focus on reforming the income tax system in a manner that positively contributes to and strengthens that recovery. These reforms will give confidence about the future and create the opportunity for businesses to grow again. In the summer, the Government committed to delivering better living and working standards to our people, developing a considered and focused tax reform plan that reduces the 52% marginal tax rate on low and middle income earners in a manner that maintains the highly progressive nature of the tax system is a key part of this commitment. This will be delivered over a number of budgets. Reform starts today by making it more attractive to return to work, to stay in work, and to ensure that work rewards individuals adequately. My department estimates that a consistent series of reforms along the lines announced today, delivered over a 3-year period, could boost employment levels by as much as 15,000 jobs when the full impact of the changes have taken effect in the economy. To deliver on the plan, I am increasing the entry point to the universal social charge to just above 12,000, removing 80,000 low-income workers from the charge altogether. I am increasing the entry point to the second rate of USC from just over 10,000 to just above 12,000, and the upper ceiling for this band is increasing from just over 16,000 to just above the level of the minimum wage. I am reducing the 2% USC rate to 1.5%. I am reducing the 4% USC rate to 3.5%, and I am increasing the income tax standard rate band by 1,000 to 33,800 for single individuals and by 2,000 for two working in a household. Reducing the top rate of income tax, I am reducing the top rate of income tax from 41% to 40%. I am introducing a new 8% USC rate for incomes in excess of 70,000 and an 11% rate of USC for self-employed income in excess of 100,000 to limit the benefits of these changes for the top 10% of earners. And I am retaining the exemption for the top rate of USC for medical card holders earning less than 60,000, and these individuals will now only be liable for a maximum USC rate of 3.5%. This rate of USC is also the maximum that will apply to the over 70s who have incomes lower than 60,000. These changes mean that everyone who currently pays income tax, or USC, or both, will benefit from today's budget changes. For example, a part-time worker earning 12,000 will continue to face no income tax and no USC charge. A minimum wage worker will now face a maximum USC rate of 3.5%. A working family with 3 children, where both parents earn 50,000 each, will have an additional £100 per month, €100 per month in their pocket. But all employees with incomes in excess of 70,000 will continue to face a marginal rate of 52%. These changes enhance the progressivity of our income tax system, with the top 1% of income earners now paying 21% of all income tax and USC collected. In contrast, the bottom 76% of income earners will pay 20% of the total. This is the first instalment of a plan to progressively reduce the 52% rate on low and middle income earners in a manner that maintains the high progressive nature of the Irish tax system. I have set the direction and the parameters for this reform today, and I will follow this approach in next year's budget, and if the government is re-elected, this approach will be followed in the 2017 budget. We will continue to ease the burden. We will continue to ease the burden on those in the middle in a targeted manner, without giving disproportionate benefits to those on highest incomes. The 52% marginal rate will be lowered further, while ensuring those on higher incomes continue to pay their fair share. Progressivity will be copper-fastened by giving greater importance to USC at higher incomes, so that the capacity of higher earners to shelter their income through tax breaks is significantly curtailed. I now turn to funding these tax changes which I have announced. The measures I have announced today will cost an estimated $585 million next year, and this cost has to be paid for. So with effect from midnight tonight, the price of 20 cigarettes will increase by 40 cents, with a pro rata increase on other tobacco products.
Sorry, just let us all hear, will you please? Thank you.
This will bring the price of cigarettes in the most popular price category to €10. In addition, a 25-gram pouch of roll-your-own tobacco will increase by a further 20 cents per 25-gram pack. Revenue is also being raised through previously provided for changes in the betting duty and as a result of changes in VAT rules at European Union level. Collectively, the revenue-raising measures in the budget will contribute over 167 million to the exchequer in the coming year. I am not raising taxes on alcohol. I am not raising taxes on petrol. I am not raising taxes on diesel. I am not raising motor tax. I am not raising the vehicle registration tax.
You learned your lesson last weekend.
Actually,
Why do we always have the same voices shouting?
They're worried, Gaspar.
Why is it always the same people?
Now, Matty.
Will you proceed, Minister?
actually, I'm not raising any other taxes at all. Because I'm able to fund the costs of these reforms and incentives through improved tax revenues arising from economic growth and expenditure restraint. Both the taxation and expenditure sides of this year's budget are designed to support and broaden the economic recovery that we are now experiencing. Available resources are being carefully targeted on initiatives that will build consumer confidence, support jobs and strengthen demand in the domestic economy. The measures introduced today will put more money into the domestic economy, assist local businesses and retailers, and drive growth right across the country. We as a country have travelled a long road to get to this point. Managing an economy is not just about numbers. Without the support and resilience of the Irish people, our public finances would not be now under control and our economy would not be growing. I believe this budget is the right approach for Ireland at this point in our recovery. As I have said, we have travelled a long road and we are now at a very important crossroads. We are now facing a choice. Do we return to the past, unwind the progress and structural reforms made and pursue boom and bust policies? Or do we look forward and continue to build for a better future with a new economic model? Colleagues will recall Robert Frost's poem, The Road Not Taken, which starts with the line, "Two roads diverge in the yellow wood." The road ahead of us diverges, and we have a choice to make. Do we take the road frequently trodden by Irish governments in the past? A road whose signposts are tax and spend, and where one's journey is through boom to arrive at bust? Deputy, I'll read that again in case you haven't heard it.
No, in fairness, Matty got off the ship.
Do we take the road frequently trodden by Irish governments in the past, a road whose signposts are tax and spend, and where one's journey is through boom to arrive at bust? Or do we, like Frost, take the road less travelled by? A road whose milestones are prudence and caution, a road that delivers stable economic growth, a road that encourages investment, a road that rewards work and creates job opportunities, a road that delivers high-quality public services, a road on which our citizens have certainty about their incomes and can plan for their future without fear of another bust, a new road for a new Ireland. I know the road this government will take. I commend this budget to the House.
I now call on the Minister for Public Expenditure and Reform, Deputy Brendan Howland, to make his statement on the estimates, without interruption.
Count Corla.
Please.
Today, Michael and I are announcing this
Thanks.
government's fourth budget. It's a significant day and it marks the end of an era of budgetary austerity. This time last year, we estimated that to meet our budget deficit would require further cuts of €1.3 billion on the spending side. That we are now in a position to actually increase expenditure responsibly indicates the progress we have made. To be forced to reduce expenditure for the past 6 years and 7 budgets was unprecedented. It's the scale, Ceann Comhairle, of the damage inflicted on the Irish people by Fianna Fáil in government. We now have some flexibility to meet emerging demands and to invest in our public services. This is a further sign that we are normalising both politics and economics following the greatest economic crisis in our history. As the Minister for Finance has indicated, this government's priority is to keep our public finances on a sustainable path to recovery. The spending measures announced today are absolutely consistent with that goal. We're all too well aware of the price to be paid for losing control of our public finances. We know that it's a high one. We committed to bringing our deficit to under 3% of GDP by 2015. Today, Ceann Comhairle, we honour that commitment, not just to our European colleagues, but to our own future generations. In fact, as the Minister for Finance has indicated, the deficit target we've set for next year is 2.7% of GDP. But as a government, we've never believed in austerity for austerity's sake. I do not believe that further cuts are necessary. Economic and employment growth have always been the best solution to addressing our fiscal deficit. Of course, arising from our acceptance of the fiscal treaty referendum, our public finances are now governed by the new European fiscal rules. As we pursue our path towards a balanced budget in structural terms, our expenditure growth is limited by the medium-term growth capacity of the Irish economy. Today, Ceann Comhairle, I will publish the comprehensive expenditure report, been circulated now to members, setting out expenditure measures for next year, 2015, and departmental expenditure ceilings up to 2017. I will also be publishing later this week background papers on our spending options, including all departmental submissions received as part of the comprehensive review of expenditure. Gross current expenditure for 2015 will be just over €50 billion. This figure represents an increase of expenditure of €429 million over the 2014 revised estimates. This increase in spending is targeted primarily at critical areas in social protection, in health, in education, in justice, and in housing. It is intended also that current expenditure will rise by further amounts in 2016 and in 2017. The allocations published today contain some increases to meet service pressures that we've identified. There will be further improvements announced next October in line with the government's set priorities. The extent of any such increases will be determined by future economic growth and by the level of progress made towards our medium-term objectives. I'm also pleased to announce an increase of €210 million in the capital spending programme for next year. Next year in capital we'll be expending more than €3.5 billion. This again will increase further in 2016 and 2017. We are investing in our future, and the detailed capital review setting our priorities right up to 2020 will be published before year end. This brings the net overall increase in expenditure over last year to €639 million. Ceann Comhairle, that's a position €2 billion better than we envisaged this time last year. An out-of-control property bubble played a significant role in our economic crash. We've not been able to build enough houses in recent times to meet the demands that has been driven, thankfully, by our economic recovery. We have a supply deficit, which has pushed up prices, particularly in urban areas. This, in turn, has led to a decline in the availability of social and affordable housing, both for purchase and for rent. The Government is committed to addressing this social problem. The Minister for the Environment has proposed a number of measures in the recently announced planning bill and will shortly elaborate on Government's social housing strategy for 2015 to 2020. These measures are complemented by the announcements just made by the Minister for Finance to stimulate wider housing supply. The Government is determined to meet the scale of social housing with a level of investment commensurate to the scale of the challenge we face. Our strategy involves a multi-annual approach to significantly increasing the provision of social housing, combining a considerable increase in exchequer investment with innovative approaches to improve supply. Therefore, Ceann Comhairle, I am announcing an overall capital investment of over €2.2 billion for social housing provision for the next 3 years. This will involve 3 main strands. Firstly, over €1.5 billion will be directly invested by the Exchequer between now and 2017. Secondly, public-private partnerships will be used to invest a further €300 million in social housing units by 2017. And thirdly, an off-balance sheet financial vehicle, will provide at least €400 million more from 2015 onwards to approved housing bodies. Turning specifically to next year, I'm allocating over €800 million for the housing programme in 2015. Over €450 million of this will be for capital investment. This represents the first major investment in housing made by a government since 2009. Further measures will be taken in 2016 and 2017, with allocations of €500 million and €600 million respectively for those years for social housing capital. This capital investment will deliver an additional 2,500 housing units next year and over 6,700 housing units by 2017. As well as I've said, Ceann Comhairle, as well as increasing direct exchequer investment, we also need to explore off-balance sheet approaches to delivering on this urgent social need. The first approach is to develop public-private partnerships. These are not the land swap deals between local authorities and developers which so obviously failed in the last regime. We are going to adopt the successful model that we've developed over recent years that has delivered 23 schools in a time of very limited resources. The firm objective from this measure is to deliver a further 1,500 housing units by 2017. The second non-exchequer approach is to set up an off-balance sheet financial vehicle to channel investment funds to the voluntary housing sector. This will operate on an independent commercial basis to provide financing to approved housing bodies. The financial investment vehicle would be open to both private investors and bodies like the European Investment Bank, and we've already had discussions with them. It is the intention of the Government that €400 million of public investment will be available, including from the proceeds of the sale of Bord Gas energy business. This will leverage private finance and provide at least another 2,000 housing units over the period 2016 to 2018. The Government believes, Ceann Comhairle, that it is entirely appropriate that the disposal of one state asset should finance a different state asset which meets an urgent social need. Overall, this large-scale investment will fund the provision of well in excess of 10,000 housing units between now and 2018. In addition to capital funding, the introduction of the housing assistance payment will support the social housing needs of 8,000 households. An additional 3,000 households will be housed by local authorities through the leasing of houses next year. I am also pleased to announce, Ceann Comhairle, an additional €10 million will be provided for accommodation and related services for homeless persons. This will increase the annual expenditure for tackling homelessness to €55.5 million next year. This goes beyond the Government's existing commitment to maintain expenditure at the 2013 level of €45 million to 2016. Unemployment is falling faster than almost anyone else and anywhere else in the EU. It now stands at just over 11%, down from a high of 15.1% in early 2012. We expect it to fall to 10.2% in 2015. And I should say that we have created 76,600 net new jobs. And the number of people now at work is as high as it was pre-boom in 2009. Unemployment, Ceann Comhairle, is still too high, but the employment support measures we've introduced are paying dividends. In 2015, €1.6 billion will be made available to support approximately 300,000 work and training places in support of the Pathways to Work strategy. This will help people acquire the skills necessary to compete for the jobs that are now being created in this economy. €12 million has been allocated for the Jobs Path initiative next year. This will match the long-term unemployed with appropriate training and employment opportunities to get back to work. We're doubling the number of positions to 6,000 for the long-term unemployed on the Government's wage subsidy scheme, Jobs Plus. As set out in the Government strategy of priorities, and to ensure that the benefit of recovery is felt by all workers, we are establishing a low-pay commission next year. The capital allocation of €450 million, you think that's funny, of course, €450 million for the Department of Jobs, Enterprise and Innovation next year will ensure continued strong support for job creation and for enterprise supports, with a focus on building on our recent strong export performance. Another critical component underpinning future growth in jobs is sustained investment in research, development and innovation. The combined research and development funding position for Enterprise Ireland and Science Foundation Ireland next year is over €260 million, and this will enable us to leverage significant new funding opportunities externally from industry partners and from the European Union. Economic recovery without a commensurate social recovery is obviously not an end in itself. To that end, Ceann Comhairle, I am allocating €19.4 billion to social protection next year. I am pleased to be able to tell the House today that next year will be the first year since 2009 when there will be no cuts to social welfare schemes. We are determined that economic recovery...
Sorry, just settle down.
We are determined, Ceann Comhairle.
There's no need to be helping them over here, will you? Just stay quiet, thank you.
We are determined that economic recovery should be and will be accompanied by social recovery. Getting people back to work remains this government's #1 priority. A new back-to-work family dividend will be introduced to provide an additional incentive for families to move from welfare to work. This will allow families to retain the full qualified child increase of €29.80 per child per week for 12 months after they return to work, and 50% of the payment in the second year following return to work. This government succeeded in protecting basic social welfare rates for the last 3 budgets in the most difficult of times. Now that recovery is taking hold, I believe it's important that the limited scope that we have is used to alleviate the pressures faced by those most under pressure in our society. I am pleased to announce that we will increase the rate of child benefit by €5 per child from January next. Provide circumstances allow, Ceann Comhairle, we will increase child benefit again in 2016 by a further €5. We are increasing the rate of living alone allowance to €9 per week, benefiting almost 180,000 elderly people, again from next January. These are the first rate increases to be applied for social welfare since 2009, when the economy was collapsed by the previous administration. The outturn figures for unemployment for this year, 2014, are much better than forecast. The government has decided to allocate a portion of these live register savings to pay a 25% bonus to social welfare recipients this coming Christmas. This is a current year payment from 2014 figures. Whether a similar bonus will be paid next year will again depend on the availability of sufficient savings in next year's social protection vote. The establishment of Irish Water is a necessary measure to put the provision of this critical resource on a long-term sustainable footing. Securing a quality water supply, as everybody in this House knows, is a critical feature both for individual families and for the businesses that rely on quality water for jobs. But the government recognises that this measure is the last in a series of measures that have imposed burdens on the Irish people. To that end, we are determined to alleviate, Ceann Comhairle, this burden. My colleague, the Minister for Finance, has already announced a new tax allowance to reduce the water burden on working families. To complement that move, I can confirm a new water subsidy worth €100 per annum for all recipients of the household benefits package, as previously announced. In addition, this is being expanded to include all recipients of the free fuel allowance schemes who are not already covered by the household benefits package. This will benefit 653,000 households in this country, who will see their water bill reduced by €100 to mirror the allowance available to taxpayers announced by the Minister for Finance.
Stay quiet, please. Stay quiet.
All of these social protection measures will cost 190. All these measures will cost 100.
Sorry, would you please stay quiet and allow the Minister? There's hundreds of thousands of people at home who'd like to hear him, not you lot in here who want to shout him down. So please, would you stay quiet? Thank you.
Thank you, Ceann Comhairle. All of these social protection measures will cost €196 million next year, and again will be funded in the fall in the live register, getting people back to work, the most successful outcome of the policies pursued by this government. This is a real social dividend, delivered by the policies we progressed. Matty, 1.91 million people at work, higher than when you abandoned Fianna Fáil. The Taoiseach will provide more details on the full range of social protection measures later. This government continues to recognise health as a key priority and will provide €13.1 billion for the delivery of health services next year. In 2015, over 2.1 million people, nearly half the population, will have either a medical or a GP visit card. This includes our extension of GP coverage to the under 6s and to the over 70s. We will provide additional staff so that patients can access mental health services such as psychologists and counsellors in the primary care setting. I'm providing an additional €25 million to deal with delayed discharges in hospitals. I'm allocating over €3 billion to support older people and disabled services next year, and €2.3 billion for prescription drugs. Ceann, I want to pay particular tribute to our hospital services and to the people working in them. This government prioritises these key services. And I'd remind the House that the number of people working in hospitals has remained at 2011 levels of over 48,000 people, despite much increased demands on their services. The additional funding being provided today will ensure the continued provision of core services and enable delivery of programme for government commitments to further enhance health and well-being of our people. Further details will be provided by my colleague, the Minister for Health, later today. I am allocating €8.3 billion to education for education current expenditure in 2015. I can confirm that there will be no increase in class sizes, there will be no reduction in the number of teachers or special needs assistants. On the contrary, next year will see more than 1,700 additional new full-time posts. This is comprised of 920 new mainstream teachers, 480 new resource teachers and 365 additional special needs assistants. I'm also allocating €530 million to education for capital expenditure. I think it's worth noting, Ceann Comhairle, that in the lifetime of this government, over 150 new schools will have been built, together with large-scale extensions or improvements of a further 100 schools. At third level, we've seen the completion of the first phase of the new Grange Gorman campus at the Dublin Institute of Technology. I would like, Ceann Comhairle, to briefly outline some further measures. €2.2 billion will be allocated to the justice sector. This will allow for the future recruitment of more Gardaí. As my colleague, the Minister for Justice, will outline later, this funding will also support the Justice Reform Programme. This programme includes plans for the reform of An Garda Síochána, the strengthening of the remit of GSOC, the establishment of a new independent policing authority, the Court of Appeal, the Irish Human Rights and Equality Commission and the establishment of the Charities Regulatory Authority. €975 million will be allocated to children and youth affairs. This will support the new Child and Family Agency, TUSLA, in its delivery of integrated and effective services, including the improvement of residential and foster care services. A capital allocation of €35 million will be used to support additional and improved child detention services. The Minister for Children and Youth Affairs will provide further details of these plans again later today. Next year will see an increase in the agricultural vote to over €1 billion. The Minister for Agriculture will use this to support the Rural Development Programme, the Seafood Development Programme, the Food Harvest 2020 Plan and the innovative Beef Data and Genomics Programme. Funding will also support the implementation of the report of the Commission for the Economic Development of Rural Areas. I'm committed to ensuring that the benefits of our economic revival are shared right across the country. In this context, Ireland has secured €1.2 billion in structural funds for the period 2014-2020. This represents an increase of 8% over the previous 7-year period and includes a special allocation of €100 million for the Border, Midlands and West region. This funding will be delivered through operational programmes co-financed by the Irish Government, the European Social Fund and the European Regional Development Fund, with a combined value of just over €2 billion. The Government was also successful, Ceann Comhairle, in securing additional funding for a new peace programme for the border counties of Ireland and Northern Ireland. Along with its sister Interreg programme, it will form part of a package of funding worth in excess of €500 million for the region over the next 7 years. The Government attaches a high priority to these cross-border programmes, and I am pleased to say that draft programmes have now been submitted to the European Commission by the Government in partnership with the Northern Ireland Executive. Ireland has a very strong record in the area of international development. It has been recognised across the world that we have maintained our engagement in the fight against global poverty and hunger, even in the face of extraordinary economic difficulty at home. Our aid programme prioritises some of the poorest countries in sub-Saharan Africa. Next year, some €476 million is being provided through the international cooperation vote of the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade. Combined with our share of the EU development cooperation vote and contributions from other government departments, this will bring our overall official development assistance to some €600 million next year. This level of funding will enable Ireland to play a critical role in some of the most pressing humanitarian crises witnessed by generations. For instance, we have taken the lead in providing €14 million this year alone for the victims of the appalling conflict in Syria and in its neighbouring regions. We provide €10 million annually to support the Palestinian people, and Minister Flanagan at the International Conference in Cairo at the weekend pledged €2.5 million for the reconstruction of Gaza. We are one of a small number of European countries with an embassy in Sierra Leone, a partner country for our aid programme. Through the Irish aid programme in both Sierra Leone and Liberia, and our funding of NGOs throughout West Africa, we are currently providing €16 million in developing assistance, much of which is focused on strengthening health systems, but also on directly fighting the Ebola outbreak. I am announcing an increased allocation of €212 million for arts heritage, an increased allocation of €212 million for arts heritage in the Gaeltacht next year. This will be used to sustain the work of the Arts Council and to support our important cultural institutions and the Irish language. I am also allocating €61 million in capital expenditure in this area. As well as investing in our future, funding has been provided for a programme of commemoration projects related to the social and political developments of the decade from 1912, which helped to form modern Ireland. The Minister for Arts, Heritage and the Gaeltacht will provide details later today. I am happy, Count Corla, to confirm continued investment in critical defence funding with an allocation of €885 million. The Minister for Defence will use this funding to prioritise naval service vessel renewal. Funding will also allow continued participation in overseas peace support operations. I'd like to take this opportunity to acknowledge the dedication and commitment of our defence forces, both at home and representing Ireland with such distinction abroad, particularly as we've witnessed in recent times. These are just a few of the measures that we set out in detail in the comprehensive expenditure report before the House. Public service reform remains at the heart of the Government's agenda and will focus on ensuring efficiency and improving outcomes for service users. That's every citizen in the country. Investment in public services will be targeted at priority areas and will be linked closely with reform. This Government is not going to allocate resources to services that are unreformed. The cost savings delivered through the Government's reform programme are being used to support priority frontline services, as I've just set out. Public service numbers have been reduced by 10% since 2008. I'm pleased to announce that there will be no further overall reductions. An important part of the reform agenda is greater autonomy for departments and agencies to manage their own staffing levels. From next year, I'm pleased to announce that departments will have discretion over staffing levels within the agreed overall pay framework. In tandem with the announcements I've made regarding additional Gardaí, teachers and so on, next year, we will also see a resumption of recruitment into the civil service. We need to provide opportunities for people to enter employment in our public services. I also intend to launch the new civil service renewal in the coming weeks. This marks an end of the moratorium of recruitment, but in a targeted and in a focused way. Ceann Comhairle, I concluded my estimates address 2 years ago by saying that the Irish people would, in time, be proud of our collective national response to the biggest economic crisis in our independent history. The improving economic statistics are proof of that response. They're a tribute to the Irish people. Not everything is mended. Not everything is yet as it should be. We still have a way to go, but our collective achievement in the face of adversity is a considerable one. There remains challenges ahead, but discipline, hard won, will not be jeopardised. Irish people will not thank anybody who forgets and repeats the mistakes of the past. As we enter a new era in Irish history, that is this government's commitment to the people of Ireland.
I now call on the spokesperson for Fianna Fáil.
Thank you very much.
Could I ask these members, please respect the deputy who's about to speak. Thank you. If you wish to leave, I'd suggest maybe just take a moment when we get them out, those who want. Sorry, would you please leave if you're leaving quickly? Thank you. Oh, sorry,
Next year.
I know they haven't long left, but
sorry, Deputy.
You're a visionary, Ceann Comhairle, you're a visionary.
Sorry, will you please respect the Speaker, and thank you. No talking in the galleries, please. Thank you. Leave the chamber if you're leaving. Thank you.
They're invincible.
Ceann Comhairle, that's part of the problem we have. The government of today does not respect the opposition. Minister, this budget is all about using borrowed money to buy votes. The headline element of your budget today is your income tax proposals. That's the headline measure, Minister, your income tax proposals. And having decided to go down the road of income tax, I honestly believe you have made a mess of it. And let me give you a number of examples, Minister. We've heard all the rhetoric that this would be the budget to reduce the burden on low and middle income families. An individual working full-time, earning €32,000 a year, is going to benefit from your income tax package by €174 a year. €174 a year, Minister. The same individual, Minister, will of course now be facing water charges of €200, €300, €400. Who knows? That individual is certainly worse off as a result of this budget.
Sorry, Deputy. Listen, I asked for silence when the Minister was making his contribution. I now ask for silence for the opposition deputies, please. We do live in a democracy, in case you've forgotten about it. Thank you. Yes, thank you.
You see,
We had to listen to you.
You see, Ceann Comhairle, this is part of the problem we have, because this government is completely intolerant of any criticism, of any debate about its measures. It believes it is invincible. Well, I can tell you this much, you're not invincible. I am standing here on this side of the House with a mandate to represent people and to question your budget. And I will do so based on facts and based on fairness. So please show a little bit of respect, not to me, but to the people I represent, and listen to what I have to say. The headline package in your income tax proposal, Minister, in your budget, is your income tax proposal. I gave the first example. An individual earning €32,000 a year is better off to the tune of €174 per annum, before we even talk about water charges. In contrast, an individual earning €70,000 a year will benefit to the tune of €746 a year, 4 times greater. Take the example of a couple on one income, Minister, an income of less than €41,800 a year. They too will benefit by €174. That's an average couple, Minister. One of them working, the other one staying at home to mind the kids. The tax benefit that you're giving to them is €174 a year, more than wiped out by the water charges that you're introducing. So let's be honest about what this budget is really about. In contrast, if you have a two-income couple, both earning €70,000 a year, because the universal social charge is calculated on an individual basis, as you know, combining the gain on USC, the expansion of the low-rate band and the cut to the marginal rate of tax, they will be up by about €1,500 a year. Now, I have to say, Minister, that your tax proposals are very unfair.